All right, so I got a chance to shoot with the brand new Nikon ZR. And let's get this out of the way. Do I think this is a RED camera? No, I don't. But I do think that this camera is very important. And it's an amazing camera in a lot of ways. But depending on how you approach this camera, you can either be very excited or you can feel very let down. And so I think it's really important to understand what this camera is, more importantly, what this camera is not, and what this camera brings to the table that makes it so special. I do want to preface this video by saying I got a chance to shoot with this camera for about 4.5 hours. Not enough time to generate a complete and total opinion, but I wanted to get the most out of this time. And so I shot it in a lot of different formats. I actually shot it up against RED Komodo, and I got a chance to get lots of different tests that's gonna give me a well-balanced idea of what this camera can do. But first, we got to talk about the new body. This is a brand new body from Nikon. This thing has a massive 4-inch screen. It also has a few different I/O ports on the left, such as micro HDMI. Yep, we're gonna talk about it. It also has a USB-C port, a headphone jack, as well as a 3.5mm audio jack, which is capable of capturing 32-bit float internal. This is the first camera that I know of that can actually capture 32-bit float internal without needing some type of like top handle or something like that. So that's a nice check on this camera. But then on the other side, you're going to find your memory card slot. Now, this camera does have a CF Express Type B card, as well as a micro SD slot, which we're gonna talk about that too. It's very clear that this camera was designed for video first because it's missing things like an EVF. It also says Z Cinema on the back of the camera, and it says Nikon and RED on the back. And this is where I think a lot of people start to come up with ideas for this camera. In fact, this is where I started to come up with ideas for this camera. What could a cinema camera, because it says Z Cinema on the camera, and a cinema camera from Nikon and RED, what could that look like? But I think it's really important to also mention the price point. This camera is coming in at sub $2,500. And the reason why I say that is because, at least at the time of me recording this video, the price, from what I've been told, has changed quite a bit thanks to tariffs and other things. So I'm not exactly sure on the exact price. I'll have that pop up on screen. But what's amazing about this camera is that Nikon is trying to give entry-level professional video shooters as much as they possibly can. But the question is, are they given enough? So when it comes to the video specs on this camera, this thing can shoot at 6K at up to 60 frames per second. Now, that, in my opinion, is more than what most of us need. I don't believe that 8K is a necessity. I think 6K is that perfect little sweet spot because it allows you to deliver in 4K but still have some room to be able to punch in, and 60 frames per second is more than enough. You also have built-in camera LUTs, including the RED LUTs, which we're gonna get into how RED integrates into this camera here in just a little bit. And as I mentioned before, you do get the built-in 32-bit float. Now, with this massive 4-inch monitor, you really don't need an external monitor. At least I believe that's what Nikon wants you to believe. Because let's face it, with a big old 4-inch screen on the back of the camera, which I will say, the camera is deceptively larger than you would think it is because of the flip out screen, you can't really look at any other camera and try to size it up, because if you look at the screen, which is what we normally look at the most, it's gonna make this camera seem like it's smaller than it really is, but it's not. This 4-inch screen is massive, it's insanely bright, and incredibly useful. Now, the reason why I say that this screen is, can be so useful, but maybe not all the way there, is because there are a few things missing when you're using this camera. For example, one of the big ones, and this has become way more popular now on YouTube and also being used in commercial projects, is anamorphic support. Now, when it comes to anamorphic lenses in the past, well, most cameras didn't need it because, let's be honest, anamorphic lenses were too expensive for most of us to be able to afford. But now, with the likes of Sirui and Blazar and others, anamorphic lenses have become way more affordable, which means more creators are using them. And unfortunately, at least at the time of recording this camera does not support anamorphic de-squeezing. This becomes an issue when you start looking at the HDMI port again, because this means now you will need to use a monitor in order to de-squeeze that image. Now, personally, I believe that if we had de-squeeze in the camera, this would make things a lot easier and would lessen my decision on is the micro HDMI an issue? At least as of right now, I do believe this is something that I wish Nikon would have put a full-size HDMI in, and that's just something that we're not gonna see get fixed with a software update, obviously, but we could see de-squeezing being added in a software update, and so I really hope that's something that shows up. Another feature that a lot of beginning cinematographers are gonna find helpful in this camera is the fact that this camera does have IBIS. Now, I got a chance to test out the IBIS, and while I thought it was, pretty good, the truth is that in most professional cinema cameras, you actually don't find IBIS. If you look at cameras like the brand new Canon C50, there's no IBIS. If you look at other RED cameras that have hit the market, such as the Komodo, Komodo X, the Raptor, Raptor X, and even the brand new Raptor XE, these cameras do not have IBIS. So while yes, this is a nice thing to have, you can definitely see this being a part of something being brought over from the Nikon side of things, which, if you're a beginner and you don't have a gimbal and you're not really sure how to make sure that your shots show up extra smooth, well, this is a nice bonus, and I know why a lot of videographers love having this in their cameras. Now, before I get into my thoughts on the RED integration into this camera, because I do think that is very important to talk about, I do want to talk about how they are making this camera something easier for beginning videographers to make the jump over to it. One of the first ones is the fact that this camera allows you to have vertical support, which is fantastic. You turn the camera and then all of your modes and menus all change for vertical. That's nice, especially in the world of social media. Another big thing that I found really helpful is that this camera is a photo shooting camera as well. So while yes, it is obviously designed for video, it can be switched over into photo mode, which happens instantly, which I absolutely love. I'm talking to you, Canon, with the new C50 and even the R5C. I wish that would switch over just a little bit faster. This camera switches immediately. Love that. So you can take photos with this camera, which is great, especially if you need to use it for creating content online, taking a thumbnail, all things that creators use on a regular basis. But now we need to talk about the actual RED integration into this camera, because to me, that is the most interesting part about this camera and what makes it so special to be the first camera to come out to be made with collaborations directly from RED and Nikon. So this camera shoots in a lot of different formats. You have Apple ProRes RAW, you have ProRes, you have H.265, and now you have a brand new RAW codec called R3D NE. And the reason why I say this is a brand new codec is while yes, REDs have been shooting on R3D RAW for years, this is a brand new flavor of R3D that we have not seen on any other camera so far. This codec is a 12-bit RAW, and while yes, it is R3D, the workflow currently is a little different. At the time of recording this, I'm not sure what editors will actually support this R3D file, but in the past, whenever we had an R3D file on one camera, whenever a new camera would come out, like when, for example, the OG Komodo came out, it shot in R3D in LQ, MQ, and HQ. When we got the Raptor, it was the exact same RED format, R3D, and that format was able to work in all the same editors. We're talking Final Cut, we're talking DaVinci, we're talking Premiere. However, this new R3D NE is actually a 12-bit RAW, and it currently is not supported across all the same editors. Now, from what I've been told, is that DaVinci will be able to support this pretty soon after release. But let's talk about the actual files for a second. One of the first things that you're gonna notice whenever you are shooting with this brand new R3D format is that it is a little bit more data rich than you may be used to whenever you're shooting with R3D. One of the nice things about shooting with R3D is that you get a lot of different compression ratios. Like I mentioned before, you have HQ, MQ, LQ, and even ELQ. Currently on this version of the R3D, there is no other compression ratios. And in fact, the camera really doesn't tell you what compression ratio you're currently shooting in, which, as my tests have shown, is it's pretty data rich. It's going to use quite a bit of storage. Now, one thing that I did notice when I was shooting with the R3D files was that they were a bit noisier than some of the other codecs. Now, this is normal sometimes when you're shooting in RAW. Now, obviously, there are cameras like the Raptor X that don't really have this problem, but I mean, we're talking about a $25,000 camera here. But the reason why you typically see a little bit of noise in RAW files is because the camera is not actually doing any denoising, because it is literally the raw image out of the sensor. Now, when I brought these files into Red Cine X, I saw some extensive extensive moire and some noise inside of Red Cine X. However, as soon as I exported it out of Red Cine X, this all went away. So the images were still fairly clean. So I say this to say, if you shoot on this camera in R3D RAW and you see noise on the back of your screen like I did, after processing it through Red Cine X, the noise seemed to go away. So I wouldn't necessarily trust what's happening on the back of the camera. I do think it's important at this time to also mention that I was shooting on a pre-production model, and so some of these things might have been worked out by the time you guys actually get a chance to shoot on it for yourselves. Shooting on this camera was actually pretty crazy. It was so insane to see something like this from Nikon or from Red for that matter. I mean, let's face it, Red has always made pretty beefy cameras that require tons of additional accessories on them. And Nikon has really never made a camera that was so video focused, almost ever. I mean, the Z6 III was pretty close, but that was still pretty much a hybrid camera. So for me, seeing something like this from Red and from Nikon coming together to make something that neither brand had really ever made before was super unique. It's weird because I would not necessarily say this is a traditional Red camera, but I would also not say that this was a traditional Nikon camera. This is something completely new. Now, the images speak for themselves. As far as I'm concerned, the images on this camera are absolutely stunning. And when you take into consideration, again, the price of this camera, I think Nikon really has a huge winner on their hands. The only problem is that this camera does not live in a vacuum. There are certain elements of this camera that I do believe are going to be hurdles that Nikon's gonna have to overcome. One of the biggest ones is that micro HDMI. Not having a full-size HDMI on this camera, in my opinion, is a huge letdown. Another letdown is the fact that this R3D is a little different than if you are traditionally a Red shooter like myself and you're used to working with Red in a certain workflow. This is different, which means you're gonna have to learn a new workflow. And yes, we gotta talk about this micro SD card in the camera. Look, the way I would recommend that you look at this camera is that it has one card slot. Hear me out. This camera has one card slot, which is the CF Express Type B. But very similarly to the Nikon ZF, which is their retro photography, in the battery area, there is a slot to be able to drop in a micro SD card. And personally, I look at this as a, holy crap, I forgot my memory cards. Thank God I have this micro SD card slot in this camera. My recommendation is that if you do pick up this camera, go grab yourself a micro SD card and literally put it in the camera and forget about it. Don't remember that it's even in there. And then if you ever run into a situation where your card is either full or you forgot to bring your cards on a shoot, you at least know you have a backup, basically built-in storage to this camera. And that is what the micro SD card, for me at least, is supposed to be about. Now, Nikon didn't tell me that, but that's at least what makes it make sense to me. And that's the only reason I could imagine someone would want to have a micro SD card in a camera like this. Let's face it, would you rather have it in there or rather have it out? Either way, you still have one card slot with the CF Express Type B. Doesn't hurt to have it in there if it fits. So that's the reason why I think this is in there. Honestly, this is a super interesting camera, and yes, I have more videos coming out on this camera really soon because I didn't want this video to be way too long. I'm actually working on an entirely other video where I shot literally side by side with the OG Komodo and this camera, because if you want to buy a Red, I think because of the price points, those are two cameras that are very interesting to look at, and they each have their own pros and cons. So definitely make sure you hit that subscribe button so you catch that video when it comes out. But quite honestly, when it comes to this camera, while no, I will not classify this as a traditional Red camera, I also will not classify it as a traditional Nikon camera. We are stepping into brand new, uncharted territory when it comes to Z cinema. And honestly, I'm excited for what this means. Is this a camera that I am personally gonna buy? I gotta see what the rest of the market is doing right now, because even what's happening within the world of Red has got my brain buzzing. But those are just my thoughts today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave those down below in the comment section. Also, make sure you check out my secondary channel where we go live regularly. I'll probably be going live at the day that I post this video, talking more about this camera and everything else going on in the camera world right now, because the news is a buzzing. Thank you guys so much for checking out this. I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.